A while ago, we reviewed the Vivo V27 Pro, a feature-packed flagship-killing mid-ranger. But now let's talk about the regular model, the Vivo V27, which of course comes at a lower price. Can the Vivo V27 provide a similar experience to the Pro, and could this be the better deal? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our full review. The Vivo V27 and V27 Pro are upper mid-range phones that provide a very similar set of features. For example, on either model you get a curved AMOLED, fast charging, and the same nice cameras on the front and the back. Basically, the only difference between the two models is the chipset. The Vivo V27's is slightly less powerful. The back of the phone features a large square camera bump with a ring holding the two LEDs for the flash. Both the front and the back of the phone are curved, tapering into a thin plastic frame. This lends a slim profile that feels rather compact. The most interesting thing about the design though is that some of the colorways are actually able to change color when exposed to sunlight. The display of the V27 is basically the same as on the Pro model. It's a curved 6.78-inch OLED with a 1080p resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate. Content looks sharp enough here, and the panel is quite contrasty too. There's support for HDR10+ video, and you can achieve good color accuracy depending on your color settings. This display is super bright for the class too. We measured a maximum of 500 nits with the manual slider, and this can boost up to 1050 nits in auto mode when you need it. The refresh rate handling here is pretty straightforward. You get 120Hz to smooth out your swiping and scrolling, and it can dial down to 60Hz when idling to save energy. The audio experience leaves a bit more to be desired though. Just like the Pro, there's a single bottom firing speaker. The loudness is average, and so is the sound quality. We'll leave a link if you want to hear for yourself and to compare to other devices. You get an optical under-display fingerprint reader on the V27, and it's quite fast and reliable. And you can get the phone with 128 or 256 gigs of storage, and that's not expandable to microSD. Just like the V27 Pro, the vanilla V27 runs Vivo's FunTouch 13 on top of Android 13. The notification shade is pretty familiar, but you get simple circular buttons here instead of Google's large bubble-style ones. In settings, you can customize the looks and the animations of the interface. The recent apps menu is customizable too. You can choose between a horizontal tiles layout or the standard carousel formation. One cool feature is that you can launch an app or task by holding the volume down key. And there's an ultra game mode available, and it even has an in-game overlay like you'd find on dedicated gaming phones. Like I mentioned, the main difference between the V27 and the V27 Pro is the chipset. The V27 packs a MediaTek Dimensity 7200, compared to a Dimensity 8200 in the Pro model. And as expected, it's a bit less powerful. In benchmarks, the V27 trails behind the Pro model, but still provides good scores for the mid-range class, both CPU and GPU-wise. And overall, we didn't have any issues with the performance. Plus, the thermal management here is great, with the V27 barely throttling during our prolonged stress tests. The V27 has the same battery capacity as the V27 Pro at 4600 mAh. But perhaps because of the more efficient chipset, the battery life is even better here, with an excellent endurance rating of 134 hours in our tests. Both the Vivo V27 and V27 Pro are rated for 66-watt charging, but for some reason Vivo includes an 80-watt adapter. Even stranger is that the charging seems to be faster on the non-Pro version. We were able to charge the V27 from 0 to 82% in half an hour. Now onto the cameras, which are the same as on the Pro model. On the back there's a 50-megapixel main cam, an 8-megapixel ultrawide, and a 2-megapixel macro cam. And on the front there's a 50-megapixel selfie camera which has autofocus. Let's start off with the main cam, whose pictures come out at 12.5 megapixels by default due to pixel binning. The daylight photos are excellent, with plenty of detail and sharpness and likable colors, which pop but don't go overboard. There's plenty of contrast, and while the dynamic range is solid, you may end up with darker shadows in some scenes. Portrait mode shots have great subject detection and nice looking blurred backgrounds. In low light conditions, the main cam's photos have excellent detail and a bright exposure, with well-developed shadows and decently contained highlights. The colors are great too, with likable saturation. You can also toggle on a night mode, and it makes a bit of a difference. Light sources are better defined, with less haloing. The shadows get some extra detail too. And the sharpening is dialed up pretty high. The V27 can record 4K video at 30 FPS with its main cam. This footage is sharp and detailed, with nicely saturated colors, and good contrast and dynamic range. There is electronic stabilization available, and it isn't perfect, with some wobble and shake when walking. Pans are smooth though. In low light, the main camera's footage is pretty solid. Dynamic range is decent, there's no desaturation, and the detail is respectable. Now let's talk about the ultrawide cam. Its 8-megapixel photos are just okay in terms of sharpness and detail. The dynamic range is a bit lacking, and the color rendition is different from the main cams. In low light, the ultrawide photos are okay, but they're on the soft side, with some dark shadows. Turning on night mode brightens up shadows and restores detail there. The brightened exposure means that highlights can turn out a bit harsh though, and these photos are even softer than the regular ones. The ultrawide camera's 1080p videos are rather soft, and the colors are once again different from the main cams. At least the contrast and dynamic range are decent. Close-ups from the macro cam are decent for what they are, but you can't expect much detail from a 2-megapixel sensor. The selfies from the V27 are great. They have excellent detail, spot-on colors, and good dynamic range. Even in backlit scenes, the subject comes out decently exposed. There you have it. The V27 is a solid mid-ranger with a bright display, a nice main and selfie cam, excellent battery life, and fast charging. The color-changing paint job helps it stand out from the crowd too. It offers basically everything you'd get from the Pro model, minus a bit of the chipset performance. And unless you're a gamer, that might not even matter. There are a few shortcomings here. You don't get stereo speakers, waterproofing, or stabilization for 4K selfie videos. But if you don't mind that, then the Vivo V27 is worth checking out. Thanks for watching, guys. If you'd like to see some alternatives to the Vivo V27, one option could be the Samsung Galaxy A34, or you could consider the Nothing Phone 1. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.